The Watcher in the Dark. Chapter 1, The House on Ashford Hill. The house had been abandoned for decades. It stood at the farthest edge of Ashford Hill, draped in ivy and shadowed by twisted trees. Locals avoided it, whispering about the family that had vanished one stormy night without a trace. The only thing left behind was an open door and a single candle still burning in the hallway. Michael never believed in ghost stories. When he bought the house at an auction, he dismissed the warnings with a laugh. "It's just a house," he told himself. "Wood, stone, and time. Nothing more." But when he stepped inside, the air felt different, thick, heavy, as if the house had been waiting and watching. A cold shiver crept up his spine as he shut the door behind him. From the shadows at the top of the staircase, something shifted. A whisper curled through the air, barely audible at first, but then it stretched unnaturally, elongating like a voice dragged through water. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, lingering, waiting. "You're finally home." The walls exhaled. A shadow moved in the corner of his vision, too quick, too fluid. When he turned, nothing was there. Chapter 2, The first night. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Even as the wind howled outside, the interior remained unnaturally still. Dust hung in the air, undisturbed for years, yet something about the place felt occupied. Michael set up his mattress in the old master bedroom, dismissing the unease creeping into his bones. He told himself it was the cold, the dust, the exhaustion. Then, just as he started to drift off, a whisper. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. "Michael." His eyes snapped open. The room was dark, the candle on the nightstand flickering wildly. He held his breath, listening. Nothing. Then, the closet door creaked open an inch. Just enough for a sliver of darkness to press through. Michael sat up, staring. His pulse pounded against his temples. He told himself it was just the draft. Until the candle went out. A shape stirred in the darkness, shifting, crawling. A clicking sound like bones snapping into place filled the silence, accompanied by a wet, slithering noise, as if something was pulling itself free from the shadows. Something brushed against his leg, cold and clammy. Chapter 3, The Shadow in the Hallway. The next morning, he explored the house. Most of the furniture was covered in white sheets, frozen in time. Dust coated every surface, yet his footsteps felt muffled, as if the house was swallowing the sound. As he reached the end of the hall, he noticed a door that shouldn't be there. It was old, far older than the rest of the house. Its wood was blackened, as if burned, and deep scratches marred its surface. A single handprint, too large to be human, rested at its center. Michael reached for the knob. Then, he heard it. A soft, scraping sound coming from the other side. Slow. Deliberate. His breath caught in his throat. Then, 3 knocks. And a whisper that sent ice through his veins. "Let me in." The doorknob twisted on its own. The air behind him grew thick. A cold breath slithered across the back of his neck. A faint laugh echoed down the hallway, but it didn't sound human. A shadow crawled along the ceiling, its fingers scraping against the wood. Chapter 4, The mirror's reflection. That night, he avoided the locked door. Something about it felt wrong, like a presence lurking just beneath the surface. He set up a few lamps in the living room, their dim glow pushing back the darkness. He felt safer until he caught a glimpse of himself in the old mirror above the fireplace. At first, it was just his reflection. Then, it blinked. His heart lurched. He hadn't blinked. Slowly, his reflection's lips curled into a smile. Too wide. Too sharp. Then, it whispered. "You brought me back." Michael stumbled backward, knocking over the lamp. The room plunged into darkness. And in the blackness, he heard it. Breathing. A slow, rattling breath coming from the mirror. Fingers pressed against the glass from the inside. The reflection didn't just smile, it tilted its head unnaturally, eyes wide and unblinking. Something knocked from within the mirror. Chapter 5, The footsteps above. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat in the corner of the room, gripping the fire poker, every muscle in his body tense. Sometime after midnight, he heard footsteps slow, dragging coming from upstairs. He wasn't alone. Gripping the poker tighter, he forced himself to move. Step by step, he climbed the staircase, his breath shallow, his pulse pounding. At the top, the hallway stretched before him, impossibly dark. Then, something moved. A shadow detached itself from the ceiling, dripping like ink, limbs twisting at impossible angles, crawling down the wall with a grotesque, insect-like scuttle. Michael took a step back. It took a step forward. A single, elongated hand reached toward him. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered. Then, it smiled. The grin stretched too wide, splitting its face as it stepped closer. The air shuddered, and the walls began to whisper back. Something brushed against his ankle. A hand, not his. Chapter 6, The door opens. Michael ran. He sprinted down the stairs, but the house shifted around him, hallways stretching, doors vanishing, the very walls breathing. Then, he heard it. The door. The blackened, scarred door at the end of the hall creaked open. A shadow spilled out, twisting and writhing, as something stepped through. Not a man. Not a ghost. Something older. Hungrier. And it had been waiting. A whisper curled into his ear. "You opened the door. Now you belong to us." Michael screamed. A cold hand clamped over his mouth. Chapter 7, The final whisper. Michael reached the front door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, the shadow stretched toward him, its whispers curling into his ears like smoke. "You let me in. Now, you stay." The cold wrapped around his throat, tightening like invisible fingers, pressing in with an unnatural weight, seeping into his skin as if something was crawling inside him. The lights flickered, and in the reflection of the window, he saw himself. Except it wasn't him. It smiled. And whispered, "Run." The house exhaled, and the door slammed shut. A soft knock echoed behind him, slow and deliberate, followed by the sound of nails scratching down the wooden door. Not human nails, but something sharper, something hungry. And then, a whisper, "Welcome home."